We've talked an awful lot about the brand new DJI Osmo Action. It's small, powerful, durable, and is really one of the only cameras out there that could be legitimately used for either action, family, or even filming yourself if you're an online content creator. I've spent the last few weeks talking about it and comparing it to other comparable action cameras, but today is not that kind of a video. Today I'm going to try to convince you that you should absolutely go out and buy your very own DJI Osmo Action. Let's get to it. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. So this is my last planned single video on the DJI Osmo Action, and goodness, gotta go out with a bang, right? The most exciting video. I do want to put this disclaimer up front. This is my personal Osmo Action. Nobody sent this to me. I've never been loaned one of these. I pre-ordered it the day it was announced, just like you. There is an awful lot to like about this camera. While it took GoPro 3 generations to come up with a really usable, fully contained waterproof camera, DJI was able to get about 95% of the way there on their first attempt. But enough of that, here's why you should buy one. First up, the video quality of this camera is incredible. It can record up to 4K 60 frames per second or 1080p at 240 frames per second, which are things that high-end cameras still have problems with. Yes, it has a smaller sensor, so there's overall less processing power required, but even a few years ago, if we'd have seen this, our minds would have shattered with, it would have been unthinkable. It would have been unthinkable for 4K 60 and 1080p 120 frames per second. Where I'm really impressed with the camera most though is the skin tones. I do think GoPros look better overall for environments, but if you do want to use this as a selfie recording yourself kind of camera or recording other people, that's an important facet of it. The real reason that I like this so much, and I ended up picking this as my travel camera over my previously stated Osmo Pocket, is because of one main thing. The Osmo Pocket has a depth of field, and to make sure that the correct subject is in focus, it has a contrast-based autofocus system. Now, those kind of systems work perfectly well if you want to take photos on an actual stills camera. Like we're currently on a GH5, and the Lumix cameras have a lightning fast single point autofocus. Some of the best you're gonna find, but they struggle in continuous video autofocus, hence why we're not using it right now. This camera, the Sony a6400, is on continuous autofocus because it's great. Well, guess what? The Osmo Pocket also has problems with its contrast-based continuous autofocus system. And because of its teeny screen on the front, you can't actually tell if what you want is in focus or not until it's too late. I will come back, review the footage, and then see, oh hey, out of focus, great. Glad I ruined that clip. The Osmo Action decided not to fall into this trap, and much like the GoPro it's borrowing inspiration from, everything is in focus. It sounds like such a simple thing, right? Well, of course everything should be in focus. It's a camera, you want to see everything, it should all be in focus. Well, when it does come to bigger cameras, you don't always want everything to be in focus, but those bigger cameras generally have some ways to manage that focus, whether through manual focus assist like the GH5 or good phase detection autofocus like the a6400. Like these cameras have ways to manage having a shallower depth of field. Now, this little difference makes the Osmo Action hugely more useful in my opinion. Just hands down, it's incredible. But this difference also enhances something that the Osmo Action also includes, and that's this front-facing screen. Now, in all fairness, I do feel like these screens on the Osmo cameras are pretty gimmicky at times. They aren't natively set to show you a standard widescreen resolution. You do have to change them into 16:9, and because the way it's shaped, you will lose some of the screen real estate because the black bars are gonna go up on top and bottom. Not only that, but generally, like I said, they are too small to tell what is in focus. But here you don't have to worry about it because everything is in focus. That's genius, right? It sounds like it's smart. It's smart. That lets you not need to actually rely on this screen. If this screen wasn't here, the camera would still be just as useful because the only thing you really need to use this for is for framing. And yes, that's important, but without it, you could still use the camera. And that's where this screen, combined with its image quality, really works. Since again, it's a small screen, you don't need to use it for things that larger cameras can do. All you need to do is glance at it to make sure your exposure is somewhat close to being usable, and you, or whoever the subject is framed correctly, and boom, you can hit record and get going. So it's just infinitely usable. Like that, it's so simple, and yet it really works. Something else about the image quality I want to touch on really quickly before we move to other awesome reasons you should buy this camera. You can be in the let's call it highest normal recording mode, the 4K 60, and you can select a mode that will take out most of the fisheye distortion. That's another thing that is straight up fantastic. My biggest wish of the new and old GoPros, as we've seen so far this week, is that they include their linear mode when using 4K. I mean, they still haven't. When you want to use GoPro as a more traditional camera, you have to use it in less than 4K, because in 4K, you only get their wide mode, but not on the Osmo Action. It does crop the image in pretty far. I mean, that's how the camera takes out the fisheye distortion, right? But even then, it's still a very wide field of view and can easily capture your entire surroundings, so you don't have to worry about that weird look that, I mean, I hate fisheye looking footage because honestly, it makes me dizzy to watch fisheye video. Like, I really prefer anything else. And a quick honorable mention in regards to the image quality is the low light indoor performance of this camera is shockingly okay. What? It's shockingly okay? Yes! Normal action cameras have unusable or pretty darn rough image quality indoors, but the Osmo Action actually looks okay. Like, you could potentially use this as an indoor camera, and for that I'm most impressed. I mean, that's more impressive than anything else in the image quality, that this can work well indoors. I mean, check it out. And this is the, like I said, this is the indoor image quality of the DJI Osmo Action. And it is incredibly good. Like, this is still the exact same setup that you just saw on both the GH5, which is a hybrid professional video camera, the A6400, which is a low light beast. This is the exact same. I haven't touched a single thing except I set this up, I turned it on, and I hit record. And the indoor image quality is fantastic. I cannot say enough good things about the Osmo Action's indoor recording capabilities. Like, the thing, and we're going to talk about this here in a second, but the thing about this is you could use this. Like, I would potentially use this as an indoor camera. There is almost no other action camera or a camera with a sensor the size of an action camera that I would use indoors. Like, it's incredible. It is. I mean, you can see it right now. This is also the audio that you can get internal to the camera indoors. Now, does it sound as good as the XLR microphone you just heard? No, it's probably gonna be a little more echoey, a little more tinny, because it's a $350 action camera, but this image quality is so good. It's so good. I almost wish I could do the rest of the video on it, but I'm not, because I wanna use these cameras. Okay, back to the regular video. And we're back. We're going in depth in video quality as one of the main reasons because, right? I mean, image quality is pretty important when you're buying cameras. It's like the reason to buy a camera, right? Well, audio is pretty important too, and as you just heard in the indoor test, DJI didn't skimp out here, and honestly, they probably could have and gotten away with it because it is their first attempt, and who doesn't like when people add competition to a stagnant industry? Like, action cameras are a stagnant industry, and it's nice to see that some competition is coming out. The internal audio recording is pretty darn good for a camera that is fully waterproof. I mean, is it as good as the Sony FDR X3000 or the GoPro Hero 4 Black? No, absolutely not. I'd rather have the more durable camera with okay audio because, believe it or not, I lead a pretty rough and tumble life. Maybe. Oh, not really. But if you know me, you know that image quality is only important up to a certain level. If it's difficult to get that good quality, then it doesn't matter for the one-person video crew. If you are like me and you are the camera operator, the director, the subject, the editor, the scriptwriter, the financer, the everything, you just don't have time to mess with probably the least important part of that whole production. And I know, shockingly enough, as a guy that talks about cameras for hours a day, the camera is the least important part of any video production. I'm just gonna say it. The Osmo Action is one of the easiest action cameras to use out there, which is frankly pretty impressive because even a lot of cheap GoPro clones have touchscreens on the back anymore. I mean, having a touchscreen is not just a way to say like, oh, it's got a touchscreen. Super easy to use, right? And what makes the interface for the Osmo isn't that it has that big touchscreen, which is great, don't get me wrong. It's how the interface is intuitively laid out. With a quick swipe in any direction, you get taken to a main screen, either previously recorded video, manual settings, resolution, or just overall camera settings. And like I said in the video where I compared this to the GoPro Hero 7 Black, I like that you can swipe through resolution and frame rate as opposed to tapping. I mean, again, that sounds like a small thing, but when you are out mountain biking, unless you got in a chest harness or you're just like out in the woods, I find it easier to scroll through the settings and get what I want instead of trying to tap. Like, there are I screw up settings all the time when I'm like trying to tap, when I'm all sweaty and I'm just tired. It's so much easier to scroll through. Something else I really like about the ease of use now that I'm getting used to it is the quick swap button here on the side. When I first unboxed the camera, I really didn't like it because the instructions on it were pretty vague. And honestly, that just put me in a foul mood to start off with. I'm human. I'm allowed to get grumpy from time to time, and the older I get, the grumpier I get. But after using this button, I do like how easy it is to not only swap between the front and the rear screens, but also to swap camera functionality without needing to swap back and forth to the rear screen and then tap through the menus. Like, if you're using the camera in front of you, you want to change something, you would then have to swap to the back screen, tap, 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 tap. But if you want to switch between photo and video mode, you can just hold the button and it'll switch for you. Sometimes using a menu less is actually using it more. I'm 35, and that's deep. And the last really big reason to buy this camera over something else is the stabilization. I have no words. It's frankly fantastic for walking around or hand-holding. Like, the best I've ever seen in an electronically stabilized system. It does have some problems in a chest harness or using it for smooth pans and tilts. That's where the Rocksteady kind of like does some weird things. But if you are walking, showing the environment, or talking to the camera, it's better than the GoPro Hypersmooth, which shocked me. Like, the Hypersmooth shocked me when it first came out. I mean, it was the best. This is better for walking or running. Even running with the camera in just regular kind of selfie stick looking mode, it's perfectly stable. No kidding, this is the future of stabilization. Not just for action cameras, but cell phones, traditional mirrorless cameras, everything. I think every camera manufacturer will be moving towards this as we get more and more processing power inside of our cameras. I mean, there's only physically so much room to move a sensor around, but algorithmically, we can do so much more. And it's a very exciting notion and time to be enjoying cameras. I mean, honestly, that's a lot of my biggest reactions to the camera overall. When I first unboxed it, there were a lot of things that irritated me, but much like everything else in life, now that I've had a chance to use it, I'm totally sold on this. I mean, especially over the Osmo Pocket. I sold my Osmo Pocket and this will absolutely be my travel camera. So yes, you should absolutely go out and buy the DJI Osmo Action. It's an incredible piece of kit that somehow worked its way into my camera bag. Thanks for watching.